I thought I was just staying late to help clean up. One last favor for the professor who always smiled a little too softly when she said my name, but when everyone else left and she locked the door behind us, something changed. The air, her eyes, her hands, and when she kissed me, I didn't stop her. I couldn't. Maybe I should have. But now, I'm not sure I ever want to go back. It started like most things do, innocently enough. The student charity event had gone better than expected. Tables were stacked with flyers, leftover cupcakes and donation jars half full of coins and folded bills. The rest of the committee had already filtered out, thanking Ms. Calloway on the way. I could have left too. I should have. But instead, I lingered. I can stay to help clean up if you want, I said casually as I reached for a stack of flyers. Ms. Calloway looked up from her clipboard, her lips parting in a small smile. You don't have to, Kayla. You've already done enough. I don't mind, I shrugged. Besides, I hate going back to the dorm when it's this loud out there. That wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. She gave me a quick, grateful nod. All right then, just a few tables left. She was wearing a navy blouse with the sleeves rolled to her elbows and black slacks that hugged her curves in a way I tried hard not to notice. Miss Calloway always had this elegant restraint to her, subtle makeup, neat posture, calm voice. She moved like someone who was used to being composed, and that made the rare moments where she'd laugh too hard or sigh a little too long feel intimate. I swept stray crumbs into a napkin while she stacked chairs. The hum of soft music played from the speaker in the corner, background noise that filled the silences between us. Usually, those silences didn't bother me, but tonight, I kept catching myself watching her when she wasn't looking. The arch of her neck as she turned, the way a strand of her dark blonde hair had fallen loose behind her ear. God, she was beautiful. But not in the way girls my age were. There was something untouchable about her, refined, distant, the kind of woman you didn't flirt with, the kind of woman you fantasized about quietly, secretly, and never spoke it aloud. You've been helping at every event this semester, she said, setting a box down beside me. Even the ones you didn't sign up for. I glanced at her, heart skipping. What can I say? I'm just a fan of good causes. Ms. Calloway smirked, then raised an eyebrow. Or maybe you're just a fan of extra credit. My stomach fluttered. Maybe a little of both. She laughed softly, her eyes meeting mine for a second longer than they should have. It was just a moment. But it stretched, thick and loaded with something I couldn't name. I looked away first. She broke the silence by reaching for a bottle of cleaning spray and handing it to me. Our fingers brushed. The touch was brief but electric. Can you handle the front table? Sure. We moved in quiet coordination. The longer I stayed, the more aware I became of the fact that we were alone. The last of the fluorescent hallway lights had flicked off, leaving just the warm amber glow from the event room's ceiling fixtures. It cast everything in a hazy, honeyed tint. Especially her. She bent to pick up a stack of programs, and I caught myself staring at the soft dip of her neckline. I blinked hard and turned away, my cheeks burning. What the hell was wrong with me? Kayla, she said gently. You okay? Yeah, I said too quickly. Just tired. She tilted her head slightly, like she didn't quite believe me, but didn't push. You've been working hard, I noticed. That made me pause. You notice? Of course I do. Her voice softened. You're one of the few who doesn't just do the minimum. You show up. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just kept wiping the table, slower this time. When we finally finished, she sighed and stretched her arms above her head. The fabric of her blouse pulled taut across her chest and stomach, and I forced myself to look away again. But not before she caught me. Her smile didn't fade. You've grown up a lot these past 2 years, she said, walking toward the supply closet. That sounds suspiciously like a teacher trying not to admit their student is an adult now, I replied, half teasing. She didn't respond at first. She just placed the broom inside the closet, then turned back toward me with a look I hadn't seen before, measured, thoughtful, almost assessing. Maybe I'm still figuring out where the line is, she said quietly. My heart stuttered. I opened my mouth to ask what she meant, but she was already walking back toward the front of the room, gathering her coat. Well, that's everything. She looked around the cleaned-up space. Thank you again. I mean it. I nodded, pulse still fluttering. Anytime. She moved to the door and placed her hand on the handle, pausing. I'll see you in class, she said, her voice back to normal. but her eyes lingered, like they were asking a question she wasn't ready to speak yet. She opened the door and stepped out into the hall. Heels echoing in the silence, I watched her walk away until she disappeared around the corner. I stood there alone, still holding the spray bottle, my hands trembling slightly. It had just been another favor, just another late night. So why did it feel like something had already begun? The next time I saw her, nothing seemed out of place, at least on the surface. Ms. Calloway stood at the front of the lecture hall, moving through her usual rhythm with practiced ease. Her blouse was tucked crisply into a pencil skirt, her hair pinned back, not a single strand out of place. She spoke about social constructs and community dynamics, gesturing toward the whiteboard with controlled grace, as if everything about her was just as it had always been. But I saw it in the way her eyes flicked toward me, quick glances that lingered a beat too long, once, twice, again. They weren't obvious. No one else would have noticed, but I did, and each time our eyes met, a quiet shiver rippled through me as if we were still standing in that empty hall, alone and breathless with something heavy between us neither of us dared name. I sat in the second row, pretending to take notes while my thoughts drifted far from the lecture. I kept seeing her hands, the way her voice had softened that night, the look she gave me before walking away. It played in my mind like a reel stuck in a loop. She hadn't touched me, hadn't said anything explicit. And yet, something had shifted. A line had blurred. We'd stepped too close to it to pretend we hadn't noticed. After class, I lingered. Most students rushed past, chatting and laughing, sliding their laptops into bags, relieved to be done for the day. I packed my things slower than usual, giving the last few students time to trickle out. Miss Calloway glanced up from her desk just as I approached. "Kayla," she said with a polite smile. "Thanks again for staying late the other night. I hope you weren't too worn out." I shrugged, tucking my notebook under my arm. It wasn't that bad. Honestly, I kind of liked it. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "Really?" I nodded. "Yeah." It was quiet. Calm, her expression softened just enough for me to notice. "Quiet can be nice," she murmured, eyes lingering on mine for half a second longer than necessary. I hesitated, part of me wanting to say more, to push just a little, but I kept my tone casual. "Need help with anything else coming up?" She tilted her head. "Are you volunteering for everything now?" "Only the events you're running." That made her smile slow and faint, like it caught her off guard. "Well, there is a student film showcase this Friday. It's a smaller event, but they'll still be clean up after." I tried not to let my heartbeat show on my face. "I could help. If you need, I always seem to," she replied. Then, more softly, "Most students clear out early. I'll probably be the last one there." I nodded. "I'll be there." She turned back to her papers, but I could feel the energy shift again. That same low hum of anticipation buzzing just beneath the surface. Friday came fast. The showcase was packed, projectors humming, students clapping after each short film. I watched her from the back of the room, the way she moved from table to table, her heels clicking lightly against the tile, her polite nods and half smiles as she thanked the presenters. She wore a dark maroon blouse tonight, tucked into high-waisted slacks. Her sleeves were rolled just above her elbows, revealing toned forearms and that thin gold bracelet I always noticed but never dared to comment on. When the event ended, most people vanished within 10 minutes. The lights dimmed, the air changed. It was just us again. Miss Calloway rolled up a poster and slid it into a tube, her hair messier now, strands falling out of their neat twist. I collected discarded programs from the seats and brought them over. "Don't overdo it," I teased, placing the stack beside her. She looked at me sideways. I could say the same. I smiled. "Some of us like extra credit." She didn't laugh this time. She just watched me for a moment, then said, "You always stay so late." I shrugged, leaning against the table. "Don't you ever get tired of being the last one here?" Her hands slowed on the box she was packing. "Sometimes." "Ever think about not going home right away?" That made her pause. She didn't look at me at first, just kept taping the box, then her gaze lifted, calm, unreadable. I'm used to the quiet now, since the divorce. It was the first time she'd said it out loud. "I'm sorry," I said softly. She waved it off, but her smile didn't quite land. "It's fine. It's been a year. He never liked events like this anyway. Thought I cared too much." "Sounds like he didn't know what he had." She glanced up sharply at that, then quickly went away. We finished stacking the chairs in silence. Then near the snack table I slipped and nearly dropped a box of plastic cups. She bent to help me catch it. For a moment we were face to face, close enough to feel her breath brush across my cheek. Our hands touched, then stilled. She didn't move. Neither did I. Her voice dropped into something husky. "You're not my student anymore, are you?" "Not in that way." We stayed like that, close enough for her perfume to flood my lungs, sweet and clean like lavender and something warmer. But then she stepped back. "I should grab the mop," she said quickly, turning away before I could answer. I watched her walk down the hall, her hand pressed briefly to her chest, as if to calm something rising there. I let out a slow breath. Something was happening between us. A current, a pull. And I didn't think either of us wanted to fight it anymore. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was loaded. It filled the room like steam rising off warm tiles, quiet, invisible, but undeniable. Miss Calloway returned with the mop in hand, but she moved slower now, like she wasn't sure what she was walking back into. I hadn't moved from the table. I couldn't. My limbs feel heavy, my thoughts louder than the music still humming faintly from her phone. She dipped the mop into the bucket, wrung it out, and began moving it across the floor with careful strokes. I watched the muscles in her forearms shift beneath her blouse, the way her brow pinched in concentration, as if scrubbing away the tension could make it disappear. "Do you always clean like this yourself?" I asked, breaking the silence. She glanced over. "When I can. Seems like a lot." "I like control," she replied softly. "Order." I stepped closer, watching her movements, hearing the soft squeak of the mop against the tile. "Does it ever get lonely, having everything neat and in control?" She paused mid-swipe, her eyes lifting to mine. There was something raw in her expression, exhaustion maybe, or truth. "Sometimes," she said. The mop fell still. She let it rest against the wall. "You can leave, Kayla. I'll finish the rest." I didn't move. "I don't want to," I said, my voice low. Her mouth parted like she might respond, but she didn't. Instead, she stepped over to the table, grabbing a stack of folded flyers. When she reached across me to grab another set, her fingers brushed the side of my hand. Barely there, but enough. She stopped. I looked at her. She was close enough to smell again. Soft lavender, the faint trace of something citrusy, like mandarin or orange blossom. Her eyes dropped to where our hands had touched. When they lifted again, they didn't look like a professor's. They looked like women, a woman who hadn't been touched in a long time. "Kayla," I wasn't sure if it was a warning or a plea. "Why do you say my name like that?" I whispered. Her breath caught. "Like what?" "Like it means something." She stepped back, not far, just enough to give herself room to think. Then she walked over to the door and stood beside it for a moment. Her hand hovered over the knob. I stayed still, barely breathing, and then... click. The lock slid into place. I heard it louder than the music. When she turned back around, something had changed in her eyes. No longer conflicted, no longer hidden. Just real. "I told myself I wouldn't," she said, her voice quiet, almost trembling. "But I've also told myself a lot of things that don't feel true when you look at me like that." My heart slammed against my ribs. I stepped toward her slowly, cautiously. "What if I don't want you to stop?" She blinked, her composure threatening to crack. "I'm twice your age." "So, I'm supposed to know better." "Maybe I do," I said, and before I could lose my nerve, I reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. Her fingers slid between mine, hesitant, then tighter. The heat between us flared so fast it felt like the air in the room shifted. I felt her breath as she stepped in, and then suddenly she was close, closer than she'd ever allowed before. Her eyes searched mine one last time, as if waiting for me to change my mind. I didn't. I reached up and brushed a loose strand of hair from her cheek. She leaned into it just slightly. Her lips were parted, her chest rose and fell. "Tell me if I need to stop," she whispered. "You don't." Her lips touched mine, slow, soft, but shaking with restraint. She kissed me like she wasn't sure it was happening, like it might disappear if we breathed too loud. But I kissed her back with more certainty than I'd felt in months. She deepened the kiss, her hands rising to cup my face, pulling me into her. We moved blindly toward the wall, her back pressing against it as my fingers tangled in her blouse. I could feel her heart beating beneath my palms, wild, desperate, matching mine. We broke apart only for breath. "This isn't just curiosity, is it?" she asked, her voice unsteady. "No," I breathed. "It's you." She kissed me again, rougher now, her hands slipping beneath the hem of my shirt. Her touch was warm, electric, and full of all the things she hadn't said. She moved with care but also hunger, like she'd been holding back for far too long. I gasped when her lips found my throat, when her hands curved over my hips and pulled me closer. We were pressed against each other now, nowhere left to hide. She pulled back, panting, her forehead resting against mine. "We have to stop." I nodded. Neither of us moved. "You lock the door," I whispered. She smiled, a real one this time. "I know." My lips found hers again before she could say anything else. This time, there was no pause, just heat, intention, and the knowledge that when the door finally unlocked, nothing would be the same. For a long moment, we just stood there, pressed together near the door, our bodies warm and trembling, hearts crashing against each other's chests. Miss Calloway's breath was shallow against my cheek, her lips parted like she was still deciding whether to say something or keep kissing me. I didn't give her the chance to decide. I kissed her again, deeper this time, more certain. Her mouth opened to mine with a soft, desperate sigh, and then she was kissing me back like she needed it to breathe. Her hands cupped my jaw, fingers sliding into my hair, tugging just enough to make my knees weaken. I clutched the fabric of her blouse, pulling her closer, anchoring myself in the heat of her body. This wasn't like the moment in her classroom or the accidental touches that left us both pretending not to notice. This was real. This was surrender. She backed me slowly toward the long table behind us, guiding me blindly while her mouth trailed from my lips to my jaw, down the side of my throat. Her voice was barely a breath when she spoke. "We shouldn't," she murmured, even as her hands slid beneath my shirt, gliding along the curve of my waist. But I'm not strong enough to pretend anymore. I reached for the buttons of her blouse with shaky fingers. "Then don't pretend." She groaned soft and low as I slipped the fabric over her shoulders. The blouse fell to the floor, like it didn't belong between us. Her bra was pale ivory, delicate lace that looked too soft for someone who usually held herself so firmly. I traced my fingertips along the edge of it, marveling at how her breath hitched at such a small touch. "I've wanted this longer than I should admit," she confessed, tilting her head back as my lips found her collarbone. "Me too," I whispered against her skin. She guided me back until the table pressed against my thighs. In one smooth motion, she lifted me onto it, her hands firm on my hips. Her eyes locked on mine, pupils dark and blown wide, her hair tumbling loose now around her face. "Tell me if I go too far," she said. "You're not even close." Her mouth crashed into mine again, hungrier now, lips and teeth and tongue claiming every inch of me like she was trying to make up for all the time we'd both spent pretending we didn't want this. I tugged her bra strap down slowly, exposing one shoulder, then the other, finally unhooking it and letting it fall between us. She was stunning, fully, breathtakingly so. She stood there for a moment, letting me look. No more hiding, no more roles to play. I kissed her again, everywhere, her chest, her stomach, the hollow beneath her ribs. She trembled beneath my touch, a hand gripping my hair, the other tightening on the edge of the table. She undressed me with slow, reverent hands, her fingers dragging the fabric of my top over my head, unfastening my jeans, sliding them off with practiced ease. Her lips followed the trail of her fingers, brushing over my navel, the inside of my thigh, pausing only to look up at me one last time. "Still sure?" she asked. I reached for her. "Please." She didn't hesitate. Her touch was electric, deliberate. She moved with the kind of control that came from restraint, but the way her mouth moved against me told a different story. This wasn't just desire, it was something deeper. She was learning from me, responding to every gasp, every arch of my back, every whispered plea. When I came, it was with her name on my lips, one hand fisted in her hair, the other clinging to the edge of the table like I might float away without her weight anchoring me. But she didn't stop there. She climbed up beside me, straddling my lap, kissing me until I could barely see straight. I ran my hands along her thighs, up her sides, until she guided my fingers to where she needed me most. She was soaked, hot, trembling, and when she leaned her forehead against mine, moaning softly as I touched her, I swear I felt something crack open in both of us. "God," she gasped, hips rolling against my hand, her breath catching. "Kayla." My name in her mouth was a confession, a surrender, a prayer. She shattered in my arms, quietly, completely. Her nails dug into my shoulders, her lips brushing against my ears. Her whole body went still and then slowly melted into me. We lay tangled on the table for a while after that, breathless and bare. Her head rested against my chest, one leg still hooked around my waist, our fingers loosely entwined. The music had stopped playing. The only sound left was the rain tapping against the windows and the quiet thudding of our hearts. Eventually, she pulled away just enough to look at me. This changes everything, she said softly. I know. She traced a finger down my arm, lingering at my wrist. You'll still come to class? I smiled. Maybe I'll just stay after. She laughed gently, burying her face into the crook of my neck. You're going to ruin me. You locked the door, remember? Her eyes met mine again, serious now. And I'll unlock it when you tell me to. When this gets too complicated, too heavy. I shook my head. You're not heavy. You're the first thing that's made sense in a long time. She closed her eyes like those words hurt and healed her all at once. We dressed slowly, silently, not because we regretted it, but because we didn't know what came next. When we stepped back out into the hallway, the air felt cooler, sharper, like the world knew something had changed. She didn't say goodbye with words, she just squeezed my hand once gently, like a promise. I walked away with sore legs and swollen lips, heart still pounding in my chest. The echo of her moan still hummed in my ears, her warmth lingering on my skin like a memory I wouldn't dare wash off. She had been my professor. A locked door between us had made her something else, and now nothing about us would ever be the same again. The classroom was colder than usual the next morning, or maybe it was just me. I arrived earlier than I ever had before, and sat in the exact same seat I always did, second row, center left, notebook open, pen poised in my hand. The room slowly filled with students, voices echoing off the walls in that careless, half-awake tone reserved for 9 a.m. lectures. No one looked at me differently. No one knew, but my skin still burned like I had something written across it in permanent ink. She walked in 2 minutes before class started, her expression calm, unreadable. Ms. Calloway wore a navy blazer today, hair tied up in a simple knot, her face untouched by anything but professionalism. Her eyes swept over the room as she adjusted her laptop, lips forming practiced words as she greeted the class. When they landed on me for half a second, I felt it, that shift. Not even a flicker in her face, but something invisible and real that tightened around my ribs. I didn't know what I expected. A smile, a secret, a crack in the mask. But I got nothing. Just a well-paced lecture about social patterns and conformity. The same poised delivery, the same carefully measured eye contact spread across every corner of the room. Except now, I knew what it looked like when her mouth wasn't composed. I knew the way she sounded when she whispered my name into my skin. I knew how her hands moved when they weren't holding a dry erase marker, and that made this silence between us louder than any confession. After class, I packed up slowly, stalling again. Students filtered out, shoving earbuds into their ears, oblivious. When the last one left, I stayed in my seat, waiting. My pulse pounded with every passing second. She looked up, met my eyes, then nodded subtly toward the back hallway. I followed. We walked in silence down the corridor, past the last classroom into her office. She shut the door behind us. This time she didn't lock it. For a moment we just stood there, awkward, quiet. The space between us unfamiliar again. She turned toward me, exhaling like she'd been holding something in since last night. Are you okay? I nodded, but it wasn't that simple. Are you? She looked away. I don't know. She moved behind her desk, fingers fidgeting with a stack of untouched papers. Her voice dropped. What happened last night? It wasn't planned. I know, I said quietly. I've never done anything like that before. I didn't think you had. She paused, then looked up at me. Really looked. Her eyes were soft now, the mask slipping just slightly. I don't regret it, she said, but I don't know what it means yet. I stepped closer, heart beating hard. It doesn't have to mean anything yet, but it happened, and I don't want to pretend it didn't. Her shoulders dropped. We crossed a line, Kayla, a very real, very serious line. If anyone found out, they won't, I said, maybe too quickly. She sighed. I don't want to be something you look back on and feel ashamed of. Then don't make it something to be ashamed of. I wasn't sure where the confidence came from, but I meant it. What happened between us hadn't felt wrong, not in the way people expected it to. It hadn't felt manipulative or careless. It had felt inevitable. and be careful and real. She came around the desk, her arms crossed tightly. You deserve someone who can show you what love is without fear. Maybe love is a little scary, I said, smiling faintly. But I don't want to be perfect. I want you. Her breath caught, but she didn't look away. I can't promise anything, she said finally. Not yet, not while I'm still your professor, but the semester's almost over, and after that, if you still want this, if you still want me, then we can talk. I stepped closer until there was barely space between us. I'll still want you, I said. She reached up and brushed a strand of hair behind my ear, fingers trembling slightly. Then I'll wait. We didn't kiss again. There was no embrace, no sweeping romantic gesture, just the promise held between our eyes. Fragile, cautious, but there. She opened the door for me. Not with a goodbye, just a small nod. I walked back out into the hallway, the same hallway I'd passed through 100 times before, but everything felt different now. Because I had been touched by a woman who wasn't supposed to touch me. Because I'd seen a side of her no one else had. Because now I carried her in every breath, every heartbeat, every glance across the lecture hall. She had locked the door between us once. Now we both had to decide if we'd ever open it again. She was my professor. She wasn't supposed to touch me, but she did. And I let her. I wanted her to. I still do. Maybe what we did was reckless. Maybe it was wrong, but it felt more honest than anything I've ever known. So tell me, was it just a mistake waiting to happen? Or was it the beginning of something real? Let me know in the comments, because I'm still standing at that locked door, wondering if she'll ever open it again.